Tina Turner was the definition of strength, passion, and power. Even in her 80s, she carried the same fire that once lit up the biggest stages in the world. Behind that fierce voice and unstoppable energy was a woman who lived through storms most people could never survive. The world knew her as the queen of rock and roll, but very few knew the woman behind the spotlight, her heart, her desires, and the things she kept private for decades. And when she finally revealed the names of the 6 artists she secretly desired, people were shocked. It wasn't just gossip. It was Tina, raw and unfiltered, speaking her truth. Her life had always been public: her marriage to Ike Turner, her painful escape, her rebirth in the 1980s, and her quiet life in Switzerland. But Tina had mastered the art of privacy. She controlled what the world saw. She gave interviews with charm and wisdom, but there were always parts of her heart she kept hidden. At 83, though, something changed. In one of her final candid talks before she passed, Tina opened up like never before. She laughed, she teased, and she finally spoke about the men who caught her eye through the years. Artists she admired not just for their talent, but for their energy, their mystery, and their spirit. Tina Turner had always said, "I may be old, but I'm not dead." That sense of humor never left her. And as she revealed her list, she did it with that same sparkle in her eyes, part confidence, part mischief. The first name she mentioned shocked everyone: Mick Jagger. Their connection went back decades. Tina and Mick shared the stage many times, their chemistry explosive. She once said Mick was wild, unpredictable, and charming in the most dangerous way. She laughed as she admitted that, during their early tours, his energy made her feel alive. She loved that he didn't care about rules or appearances. There was something raw about him that drew her in. When asked if anything ever happened between them, she smiled and said, "We danced, we sang, and we laughed. Sometimes that's enough." But the way she said it left fans wondering if there was more to the story. The second name wasn't surprising: David Bowie. Tina and Bowie shared a deep artistic respect. They were both bold, fearless, and ahead of their time. Bowie had a fascination with her from the start. He once said, "Tina is electric. You don't watch her, you experience her." Tina later admitted that she was equally intrigued by him. She called Bowie a beautiful mix of strength and mystery. She loved how Bowie blurred lines, gender, style, emotion. He was never afraid to be different. That, to Tina, was irresistible. She said that if timing and life were kinder, she might have wanted something more than just friendship. Their 1985 performance of Tonight on stage was living proof of that magnetic pull: the glances, the laughter, the shared energy. Her third choice was unexpected: Prince. Tina was nearly 20 years older than him, but that didn't matter. She said Prince was the kind of man who made you forget about age. She admired his creativity, the way he owned every part of who he was. Prince was small, she said, but when he walked into a room, it felt like the world got smaller and he got bigger. She found him mysterious, confident, and intoxicatingly talented. She loved how he expressed sensuality without saying a word. She said, "You didn't need to be near Prince to feel him, you could just feel his presence." The fourth name was pure old-school soul: Marvin Gaye. Tina had known him during Motown's golden years. She always admired his voice, that slow, velvet sound that could melt anyone. She said Marvin had a calmness that made her feel safe. When he sang, she once said, "It felt like he was talking to your soul." She admitted she had a small crush on Marvin, even during her roughest years with Ike. Marvin was kind to her, respectful, and gentle. In a world full of loud men and chaos, he had peace about him. She said, "He reminded me that not every man wanted to control a woman. Some just wanted to understand her." Her fifth choice took people by surprise: Bryan Adams. They had worked together on music and became close friends. Bryan was younger, full of energy, and admired Tina endlessly. He once said performing with her was like standing next to a storm in human form. Tina laughed when she said Bryan had the kind of boyish charm that could melt anyone's defenses. "He was kind, funny, and never tried to impress me," she said. That's what made him attractive. There were rumors they were closer than just friends, but Tina never confirmed it. She said only, "Bryan has a good heart." That's all I'll say. And then came the final name, one no one saw coming: George Michael. Tina adored George's voice and soul. She said he had the softness of an angel and the sadness of an old soul. She admitted that even though George was open about who he was, she still found him incredibly magnetic. She admired his honesty and depth. She said, "George had eyes that saw everything. You couldn't hide from him." For Tina, attraction wasn't about gender or labels. It was about spirit, confidence, and authenticity, things George had in abundance. When the interviewer asked if she ever told any of them how she felt, Tina laughed and said, "Why would I? The mystery is more fun." That was classic Tina, strong, private, and always in control of her story. But beyond the names, what made her confession so powerful was the timing. She was 83, living peacefully in Switzerland with her husband Erwin Bach. After decades of surviving abuse, health problems, and heartbreak, she was finally free. She spoke about desire not as a secret, but as something natural, a part of being human, no matter your age. She said, "People think when you get old, that part of you disappears. It doesn't. You just learn to appreciate it differently." Desire isn't only about touch, it's about energy, connection, admiration. Those words inspired millions. Fans saw a different side of her, not just the fierce performer, but the woman who still dreamed, who still felt, who still remembered. Tina Turner's honesty was refreshing. She wasn't confessing for attention. She was showing that even legends have private emotions, hidden fascinations, and unspoken stories. Her list wasn't about scandal, it was about celebrating connection and beauty in others. After that interview, social media exploded. Old photos of her with Mick Jagger and David Bowie started trending. Fans replayed her performances, searching for signs of hidden chemistry. But Tina, being Tina, had already moved on. She said her piece and left it there, with grace. Behind her words, there was also a quiet message about freedom. She had spent years being controlled, silenced, and underestimated. So in her later years, every word she spoke carried power. Naming those 6 artists was her way of saying, "I own my story now. I can talk about desire, about love, about beauty, and no one can shame me for it." That moment reminded people why she was so loved. She was brave enough to laugh about her past, bold enough to speak about what others hide, and humble enough to make it sound human. As she once said, "I didn't survive to be quiet. I survived to be me." By the end of that talk, the world didn't just see a music icon. They saw a woman who lived fully, who loved deeply, worked fearlessly, and stayed true to herself till the very end. When Tina Turner spoke about the 6 artists she secretly desired, it wasn't just a confession, it was a window into her heart. For a woman who had spent so much of her life surviving pain, control, and abuse, desire was no small thing. It was freedom. It was proof that she was still alive, still feeling, still human. To understand why those names mattered, you have to understand Tina's story. She had been through years of torment in her marriage with Ike Turner. He had broken her down, physically and emotionally. For a long time, she forgot what it meant to feel admiration or affection without fear. Love became tangled with pain, and trust became almost impossible. So when Tina later found herself drawn to certain men who radiated strength, mystery, or kindness, it wasn't just attraction. It was healing. Each of those artists represented something she had lost,